Well, can you find them later?
I will.
Because we're on the air now. Well, can you find them later?
Oh, I see.
Welcome to the Madhouse.
Because
Population us.
yes, indeed. So, welcome back once again. We've had like a 1 week delay because I was dying. Um, to the Twin Empires podcast. I'm joined today with the writer for the Wild Hunt, the Nova Bears, and the Brass Mechanists, my boy Johnny, rocking a new mic.
What's up, my guys?
And I'm also here with the author or the writer for the Death Lords and the Knights Gallant, Zephyrim.
Greetings.
And I myself, the writer for the Honorbound, the Obsidian Spectres, and the Frostwalkers Phantom. And we are here today to talk about the First Legion, numero uno, and the arch traitor himself, Heizo Renai,
The big boy in
the
charge.
Honorbound Legion. So let me delve into then what it is that we are going to talk about. So the Honorbound themselves, they are the First Legion. Their Primarch was created as the first in the order, and he was also given the position of War Master a little bit later on. Should we just start with origins? Just work our way towards it all. We'll
Yeah, let's just start from the Unification Wars. Tell us about the
chronologically.
Legion.
That's a little sip there. So the Unification Wars, the Honorbound were the first of 5 legions created to go along in the first wave. Because the legions were brought out in waves of 5 once every so often in years, and as such, being the first legion, they had to adapt very very quickly to the new roles that they found themselves in. The Honorbound Legion being the legion that would often charge in first and take the flak off all of the other legions. They just found themselves being in kind of more of a role designed to draw out their opponents, which actually kind of like gave them their dubbing up until kind of like some of the first campaigns. They were just known as the first. Their infantry were just used as powerful shock troops. They would divert the attention of their enemy away from their sibling legions and auxiliary forces. But it wasn't until one notable battle during the Africa campaign. The first led a charge from the direction of the sunrise, catching their enemy completely by surprise, and the Third Legion very swiftly attacked from the opposite direction due to the panic caused by the intensity of the initial attack. And the Emperor, who was taking part in the campaign, um, dubbed them the Dawn Titans on that day. And so the Dawn Titans continued then throughout the Unification Wars. I think at one point, let me just confirm. I believe they took part in the pacification of Luna, but I am not 100% sure. I know the Third took part in it, I think.
We have that written down somewhere.
We do have that written. I'm just checking the timeline now as it loads. No, they weren't involved. They weren't involved. So the First Legion was led by, at the time, by their Legion Master Nazai, who was given his surname when they met the Primarch. But Nazai was quite a firm believer in just being able to solve things with the tools that you had available to you. He wasn't very adaptable. He just used what was given to him, and if, for example, he was given things, new tools that he could use to achieve his objectives, then he would do that. He was accompanied later on during the Unification Wars and towards the start of the Great Crusade by his second in command, Hidan, who was a much keener tactician than Nazai was. Nazai was gifted with just being able to work with what he had. Hidan, he had a very unnatural kind of foresight that he would utilize just to see things in strategies that his enemies and even his allies just couldn't quite seem to grasp. And by using that, he just rose very quickly through the ranks because people would just recognize that he had a talent for predicting things before they happened.
Is that a literal foresight, or is it just his mind at work?
It was just his mind at work. There was no psychic kind of like ability behind it. He was just able to look at situations and just discern um, kind of like probability, I suppose. In a way, he was just able to just kind of work out what the chances were of things going a certain way, and he would also look at situations and just kind of like be very good at predicting what it was an enemy was going to do. So in terms of battles of kind of like wits and such, he was completely unmatched because he was able to look at a situation and determine what it was with a very small margin of error what his enemies were going to try and do, which is what made him just ridiculously good as a commander. And as I recognise this, he made him his right hand man, and I believe um, Hidan at one point during the Great Crusade. There was the Battle of the Midnight Divide. Um, as the other Legion forces were advancing, Hidan spotted that they'd quickly moved past a bridge to their flank, and Hidan had just rushed to defend it because he noticed that it provided the enemy with a very easy way to just hit their flanks and assault from them, but from behind. Um, and at that point, Hidan was able to reinforce it, and he held out the bridge for several days until the other forces of the Legion and the Auxilia returned. But it cost had that fallen, it would have cost the Loyalists weeks of reconsolidating their position and then moving forward again. So he was very, very valuable in that respect. Um, and then on early during the Great Crusade, they didn't really get a chance to come into their own that much. It was only probably about 5 years after the Great Crusade began that Iso Renai was found. So we'll
I
go.
guess that's as good a segue as any to go to talking about the Primarch.
Let's take another sip. Yeah, Heizo Renai was the eventual master of Costalan. He was found there as a child. Costalan as a world is quite feudal. Very much resembles feudal Japan. There's a lot of like landlocked states and vast open plains. All of the feudal lords hold up inside these huge fortresses that had been left there long before anybody else could remember. Um, and he was discovered as an infant and raised in the squalor and poverty of one of the many Castilian feudal fortresses. He grew into adulthood very quickly and spent his life serving as a warrior in the service of the lord whose kind of fortress that he had been raised in.
Who is this lord and who raised him?
He was raised by just some peasants, but he soon forgot their names because he was just drafted into service straight away. The Lord as well, Heizo prefers not to speak of it because he just doesn't believe that it's important. It
That
just,
bad, huh?
it was just he kind of just views it as a each the world the history of Costellan shouldn't be judged on who came before. Um, Obviously he kind of had a it's a brighter history should be remembered, not a darker one. And so the names of those who came before they don't need to be remembered.
So, so there's so you're hinting at the history of Castellan was very dark before Heise's arrival, and he just prefers that no one remembers that past.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a story as old as man itself. There are those who lived in wealth, and there were those who lived in like squalor. And unfortunately, in a lot of the Castilian feudal fortresses, um, there was a very small ruling upper class, and everyone else was just treated like dirt, with the assistance, obviously, of their military forces, which Heizo joined. Um, and as Heizo advanced through the ranks and gained more and more leadership, he became more and more aware of the hardship the lords exposed to the impoverished, and all of those, many of whom were the families of the soldiers that he served alongside. it was just kind of seen as one of those things that if you join the military and you become a warrior in your lord's army, you will be funded with food, and many soldiers were there just to provide their families with a source of food, despite the fact that they were putting, their friends' families to the sword. It was a very dark time, and this lasted up until a famine. One of the years into his service, and Heizo was ordered to raise a province his lord controlled to quell the riots of starving people. Heizo finally just snapped and he refused outright. And a lot of his friends and his allies who were serving alongside him, they also just refused to do it. I think tensions at that point had reached breaking, and the military just outright refused and rebelled. They chose Heizo as their leader, um, and they removed the province's lord from power, and they imprisoned them for obviously their humanitarian crimes. Heizo reformed the fortress, and he began redistributing the wealth amongst the people. So because he had the power to do things now, he began making improvements that would benefit everyone, not just the upper class. So improvements were made to irrigation, infrastructure were made, people were given educations, given jobs that not only gave them purpose, but also worked to improve the conditions of others. So the farming vastly improved, but also it wasn't just hoarded to those of the upper class; it was distributed to those who needed them as well. Um, and also, Heizo gave himself another goal. There was still a military force there, but they now had no purpose. Heizo renewed that purpose. He began raising and training an army specifically for the purpose of the liberation. So over the next decade, Heizo proved himself as a skilled warrior and a diplomat. He basically just continued growing this free army, which eventually became the Free Armies, and he just marched across the continent and later the globe, just liberating all these different provinces and countries, just to for the greater good. Often
The
preferring just to
greater
the
good.
greater good. Um,
I didn't want to make this joke or this observation, but so what you're telling us is that Heizo, who is loosely based on Japanese culture,
mhm.
um, brought down the upper class and redistributed wealth to his lower man, and is now facing a capitalist regime without a leader. So he is in fact a weeaboo space communist leading a rebellion.
How very dare you? My
I
I
I
mean,
my socialism is completely sound. I'll I I'll have you know.
I I didn't want to make the observation, but then you said shit about the greater good, and I was just like, I can't not make this
It
comparison.
it I know that the trope is like really overused, but it does make sense that like if you're going to have a working class, you need to just keep them well fed because they outnumber you. And Heizo understood that. Um, and he was joined alongside with his trusted friend Hagane Shinro, who had a bit of an unhealthy obsession with Heizo, just kind of idolized him a bit. Hagane was kind of one of the believers in the old ways of Kostalan, and he foresaw Heizo as a kind of like a prophet, and which is very unhealthy. But obviously, he kept his thoughts to himself until much later on. All the while, Heizo continued to lead his armies, eventually just encompassing most of the planet. During this time, he also came across a general who was working for an opposing lord's force, and his name was Yabura Gankai. And Yabura was known as the Butcher because he would just destroy all of the towns and villages without question, until eventually um, the armies under the command of his lord, Lord Bakan, they were thrown into senseless combat against the Free Armies. And while they gave little ground, they were systematically isolated and defeated by the Free Armies. Yabura just kind of went up towards Heizo and he was like, "Well, you've defeated me. I demand the harshest punishment that could be given for such a shameful defeat. So Heiser said, "Well, you're gonna live then, boy." And Yabura was basically just he was sentenced to serve alongside the Free Armies, in which he did, and eventually gained kind of like a respect for Heizo and what he was doing. And in the ultimate kind of act of trust, after years of fighting side by side, Yabura was given his own force to command as well. And so after kind of like roughly a decade and a half, Heizo and his Free Armies had taken most of Costalan, and they were working towards completely eradicating poverty, war, just making everything better for everyone, which is when they were found by the Imperium of Man and the Emperor.
How did the Imperium's arrival sort of, well, affect Heizo, his legion, and in the world even?
Well, it's a very different way of coming across things. Obviously, the world was exposed to the technology that the Imperium had, um, but at the same time, much of their original way of life was preserved. And I think it's because the technology was introduced so rapidly, that Costalan was given a chance to kind of like preserve much of its original traditions without kind of like having some of them just be lost to time. Because as you notice, when Japan had their industrial revolution, they were moving very quickly, um, but at the same time, like there were samurai running around at the same time when they had like field cannons and stuff like that. Costalan's technological advancement was very similar to that, but they preserved a lot of what they had already. They remembered who it was that they were. So while advancements were made in obviously the way things were created, like metalworking for swords, and the way that buildings were constructed using more durable materials, the style in which they were built, and the way the people still lived their lives didn't really change that much. It was just the way things were constructed. They were built to
They
last a bit more.
industrialized the motherland.
Yes, I'm not painting a very good picture for this like this communist super state that I'm building here, am I? um, but yeah, Heiser was eventually contacted by two figures who wished to be his advisors, and unbeknownst to him at the time, these advisors were Malcador and the Emperor. And Heiser quite masterfully demonstrated his political maneuvering and also his skills with diplomacy, as he was just kind of like um, negotiating with these two beings that he knew nothing of, like what it was that they had to offer him, and also like what Heizo had to offer these two beings as well. So quite impressed, Heizo and the Emperor formed a bond. Costellan was inducted into the Imperium, and the First Legion was immediately summoned to the Emperor's flagship, where they met with Heizo. And Heizo was quite overjoyed to find that he had like a 10,000 strong legion of his own sons born from his own genetics, but he was also quite keen to preserve what it was that they had already done for themselves, like their own culture. So when he first got started, he spent several years just watching how the legion behaved, watching Nazai and Hidan, and eventually when it all kind of came to a head, Heizo gave Hidan and Nazai their own surnames, but also granted them great clans in those names. The legion was eventually divided up into initially 5 great clans. So Heizo led the Renai great clan, Hagane led the Shinro, Yabura led the Gankai, Hidan led the Sakia, and Nazai led the Orokai. And that kind of gave the opportunity for these generals to continue commanding, but also um, kind of gave the great clans an opportunity to kind of embrace which cultures suited them better. So Nazai was one of the old guard, and the great clan basically served as more of a Terran themed great clan, whereas like Hagane Hagani was like old school Castellan, so his great clan was a lot more kind of like beholden to Castilian culture and ritual and so forth. They all kind of like evolved very, very differently of each other. Um, and I think roughly around the same time, Heizo was introduced to his flagship, which he saw while he was on the surface of Castellan, like bringing his recruits together. And as the ship was brought into low orbit, it just created this huge dark shape on the horizon. So Heizo just kind of dubbed the flagship the Dark Horizon, and just called the flagship that. Uh,
Hey, if it works.
if it works, it works. Yeah. Um, and I think not long after that, I think that there was the Goro hollowing. First contact came with the Orcs about a year after Sycanis was done. He also drew up proposals for
Well,
a standardized scheme for fortification of valuable systems. He called that the Bastia Imperialis. Just kind of like doing a lot of stuff to just help out Dad. Really, he was kind of like just a shadow assisting in the background as well.
tell us more about each of the great clans. You've talked about two of them and how they are stark opposites in some ways. What about the others?
Okay, so we've talked about the Orokai Great Clan and the Shinro Great Clan. Let's talk about Renai. So that's commanded by Heizo himself. Um, Not only are they warriors, they are also skilled diplomats. So they were the first great clan established in the wake of the Honorbound's reformations, um, and they are seen as diplomats first and warriors second. Um, so they are quite capable of throwing down as warriors, but they prefer to try and negotiate things like peacefully if possible, which doesn't very greatly kind of like affect their ability to kick ass, but they will still prefer like it as a last resort. Um,
Peaceful integration into your communist revolution.
exactly. Yeah, we're building a new little organization. They're called the Watercast. Just kind of helpfully help you all just peacefully integrate into into our weeaboo empire. But don't tell the emperor, okay? Um, and I think the only other notable character that I have within the Renai Great Clan is Tanaka Oda, who I haven't kind of come up with a story yet for, but I'm thinking of just kind of having him as a ears to the ground kind of character. If I decide to tell a story in that regard, it's going to be a one from the ground's point of view.
Isn't
Quite
he supposed to be Heizo's equerry?
to a degree, yes. Heizo kind of like takes a liking to him, takes him under his wing, but his fate is still left rather uncertain. I'm not sure if I want to kill him off yet or just keep him alive for the time being. But there will be more to
We'll
come.
talk about that more later.
Indeed, yes. The Gonkai Great Clan, that's led by Yabura, the Black Sword of the First. So the Gankai Great Clan are known as they are world breakers. If the Honorbound need a system of planets just completely broken and destroyed, they want nothing left behind, they will send for the Gankai Great Clan. Yabura, when he joined the Imperium, he was like, "Whoa, these guys could make bigger stuff. That's great." And so when looking into obviously like power swords, power glaives, lances, and so forth, he was like, "I need you to create bigger power swords." So I think what did he created these this order of warriors who would fight using huge powered adachi, which are these great big like kind of curved Japanese style swords, and he equipped them to an order of Terminators wearing cataphractite dreadnought armor that had been modified quite heavily
Which
to
do in
support the
fact have
swords.
historical basis.
They do, yes, they do, because I was told that I couldn't have Buster Swords. Zephram!
No Buster Swords allowed.
Um, but the Owari pattern tactical dreadnought armor, it was designed to strengthen the level of power granted by the armor, improved muscle amplifiers, reinforced servo in the joints. Um, these things could realistically be used to just cut tanks in half. They're that powerful, and Yabura utilizes them as just hard hitting vanguard troops. If anything goes through a breach, you can bet that these guys are with them as well. And they are extremely deadly in close quarters combat, which is where they are favored. So Yabura uses those very effectively, and the outside of the First Legion, the Yabura Great Clan the Gankai Great Clan are kind of regarded as just kind of like they are as stubborn as rocks. They will give as good as they get. They are just there to scrap. If the Gankai Great Clan turns up, then you can bet that they're in for a hard fight. We have the Sakia Great Clan. This is commanded by Hidan. Realistically, they behave quite normally compared to a lot of the other great clans, but with a slight kind of like distinction. They are ridiculously good tacticians. Nowhere near as good, say, as the tacticians of the Second Legion before their fall from grace, but they are very good. No individual merit is granted to those who achieve like particular glories on the battlefield. Every single individual who holds an officer's rank within the Legion has done so based on their ability. So it's a great clan that very much values the ability um, of their leaders. I'm looking at the chat right now. This sounds a lot like Tau propaganda.
I mean,
They
that will
know.
happen when you.
They're on to us. Send in the cleaner. But yeah, and Hidan also later on into the story, I'll just kind of explain. Well, no, we'll talk about it now. We'll do it now. We'll do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Hidan was determined to recreate the tactical sense that he had within himself. Very determined to recreate that. So he did try cloning. But that didn't work very well as with clones. It tended to work quite well to start with, and then afterwards they just ended up running into really horrible bad luck, or they just lost all tactical sense whatsoever, ended up going mad. So
Which does have support from canon examples.
yes, and that is what I was trying to go for. Obviously, clones in 40k, they don't live very long. Even the Death Core of Krieg, but they're just dying so quickly nobody really notices.
Deathcore aren't clones; they're just raised in vats.
It's close though.
It's real close. It's
Suspiciously close.
There might be cloning involved, but we know that there's a great amount of not clones.
Yeah,
Who's your
it's
daddy? I am my
it's
daddy.
artificial wombs. But yeah, so instead of just growing brand new Astartes in his image, he decided to kind of like circumvent the process. He contacted a scientist from the Eighth Legion, and using the expertise of that individual, they created 10 cloned brains of himself, and using the omophagia gland, psychotherapy,
Yeah,
omophagia, psychotherapy, and really aggressive mental conditioning. The 10 random Astartes were picked, and they consumed the cloned brains, which is considered extremely taboo in amongst Space Marines. I've been told, but it was kind of like a way to circumvent the cloning process by absorbing the memories of just an organ that is completely dead. And so Hidan was able to build a force of 10 that were called the 10 Brothers, and they acted as an extension of Hidan himself because they had his experience, his memories, and hello, and most importantly, they also had his tactical mind. Um, to the point at which it was very unclear to to the Primarchs and even Astartes who served alongside Hidan, who the real one was. They're not 100% sure. In fact, we still don't know if the Hidan that is leading the Legion is the real one or not.
I am Alfarius.
I am Alfarius. We'll also talk about.
So you've
I,
told us about the 5 beginning great clans. Tell us about the 6th one that comes around later.
the 6th one, my favorite. If you couldn't tell. So there was an Astartes who had been inducted into and kind of like spent a lot of time in the Orokai Great Clan. He was Terran born. He joined the Great Clan. He joined the Legion. I think as the reforms were happening. But Hyzo looked into this Astartes and he saw a Terran born Astartes who embodied exactly what a Costilian Astartes should be, and that individual was known as Sycanus Nakama.
For the Nakama!
For the Nakama! I think Hyzo looked at him and he just kind of like saw a perfect fusion of the two cultures. Sycanus Nakama, he held like quite heavy Castilian values and beliefs, but at the same time like had a very keen Terran tactical mind. So he kind of like combined the best of the two cultures, and very keen to like kind of cash in on this. Hyzo gave him his own great clan, and he was given the Nakama Great Clan, who were just very grumpy, um, unyielding, just very difficult to get rid of individuals. Very good at locking in and holding positions. To which Yabura eventually did call Sycanis just this unyielding, unmovable bastard because they just couldn't get rid of him. And they gave him, I think, the title of Unbreakable. And that would later come to define the tactics and attitude of Sycanis and his great clan for millennia to come. They're just very, very difficult to kill, much more so than the others. So let's talk.
So you've talked about the 10 brothers earlier. How about the other special units of the great clans?
So we've got the Kurogakure. I've talked about those already. They are Vanguard, but we haven't talked about the Kensaishi. So this is something that was born out of the darkness of Hagane's mind.
Let's just clarify real quickly. The Kurogariki are or the specialist formation of the Astartes that had the very large Odachi weapons.
Yes, they are. They're Yabura's boys. The Kensaishi are a creation of Hagane's, but they are not exclusively confined to the Shinro Great Clan. They were created originally. The original intention of them was for them to be a morale boosting unit, kind of like I suppose, kind of like a proto chaplain. They were created just to kind of like increase the faith of the warrior, because it's believed in Castilian culture that should a warrior falter in battle, it is because the bond between warrior and sword is weakened, and that a true Castilian warrior should have an extremely powerful bond between warrior and blade. So the Kensaishi were created, and the Kensaishi. Originally a small order trained to act as a morale-boosting specialist troop, they evolved over the decades to become an order of warrior priests whose presence rallied their fellow Astartes into continuing the fight. And they were also plastered in swords. Like, absolutely plastered in swords.
You think anime can be wild with the amount of swords people can wear? Nah, these guys take it up to
You just
11.
you just picture this, okay? You're a member of the Solar Auxiliary. You're a guardsman in a trench, just fighting orcs. They start swarming. They've got their axes up and everything. And then the next thing that happens, you've got this black and gold hooded Beyblade flies into the trench next to you, just starts dicing up orcs with these like katanas, and then shouts at you, calls you a pussy for not having a strong enough faith in your sword. Just points to like the combat knife you've got sheathed in your ankle, and then just Beyblades off into the next trench. That is the Kensaishi, basically.
Beyblade, Beyblade.
Gotta go fast!
Let's fight an epic battle.
So when they were first deployed, they numbered just over 100, and now their order has swollen to like several thousand, and they see service across nearly all of the Great Clans of the First Legion, apart from the Nakama Great Clan, because Psychonis just decreed that they'd not be allowed in. They don't like them. But out of combat, the Kensaishi performed services as mental guidance counselors and aides. Um, they just were able to provide guidance to the Astartes of the First Legion, and to some extent, they also kind of like ventured forth to other legions to provide guidance. They weren't very widely accepted, but that didn't mean that they didn't kind of like just offer assistance to those who needed it. So, but yeah, they're pretty good. Other aspects of the Legion that don't involve Astartes, there's the Legio Brutus.
Well, let's just make sure that we've covered our bases
We'll
here.
back it up.
So far, that's been like 3 special stuff. We have the Kensaishi, the Kurogariki, and the 10 Brothers. Do the other 3 Great Clans have their own special formations?
No. Nazai didn't believe in having in any special formations. He'd worked with what he had, which is his style. Psychonis and his great clan, they once again worked with what they had, but they also like they just fought very defensively, so they didn't see the need of any specific troops. Hidan had the 10 brothers. Heizo fought like just with the full might of his great clan. That there weren't any other specialist units that are apparent to us at the moment that were used with any of the great clans. The main ones were the Kensaishi, Kurogakure, and the 10 brothers.
Interesting.
So there is room for more to be added, but the main ones, the ones that I wanted to flesh out the most, were the Kensaishi, the Kurogakure, and the 10 brothers. As you will notice, there's a lot of character development going into my thing more than like the Legion.
Yeah, your writing style when writing about the First Legion has been very character based on how this character in this position would change, how this whole thing would work.
But there hasn't been a lot of kind of like development for the Legion, I suppose, which is something that I do need to work at. But I think what I've got is enough for me to work on now. I didn't want to just create roles for legions without looking into them properly. I wanted them to have like purpose.
Yeah. And before I interrupted you, you were going to talk about the Legio Brutus?
Legio Brutus, yes. The Legio Brutus basically envisioned or encapsulated the spirit of the Dawn Titans. They were designed and embraced the role of just marching in and making as big a noise as possible.
What is the Legio Brutus?
A Titan Legion. So a Titan Legion that was attached to the First Legion. The Legio Brutus basically just marched in and made as big a noise as possible, which better allowed the forces of the First Legion to just kind of like carry on their actions in the background, which I should have mentioned earlier because the First Legion shifted focus quite a lot after they met Heizo from just being the ones to charge in and make a lot of noise, distract the enemy. They still did that to an extent, but their focus changed from just drawing the enemy's attention to maneuvering opposing enemies. They were very much focused on battlefield control, enemy redirection,
Right.
and just line breaking. They would exploit weaknesses in positions that they themselves had helped create through just very simple suggestion with the movements of their forces. And Brutus were very key in also helping them do that. Titans of the Legio Brutus would take great pride in drawing out heavy hitters from opposing armies while using elements of the Legion to assault areas left weakened by those redeployments. So if the enemy has like a large amount of like very heavy hitters, Legio Brutus was designed specifically to move in and draw those out, so the First Legion could then exploit the gaps left by those forces being redeployed to fight the Titans.
Nice.
They've got quite a talent for taking and dishing out huge amounts of punishment, and a lot of their princeps were very bloodthirsty at the time. The overall legion was led by Princess Majoris Margrave Equivin. He was the commander of the Imperator class Titan Monolith, and then there are a few other
That's
Titans.
A good name.
It's pretty damn good. And the only other Titans with names that I've named at the minute, there's Bladebreaker, Victor Eternium, Assured Dominion, Dawnbringer, Blade Herald, Cryptoria, and Alexandria Primaris. But there's a bit of decent depth there, but then they're not a particularly big legio, but at the same time they're pretty damn effective at what it is that they do.
Nice.
Which is just making a noise essentially.
I mean, Titans are probably the best thing to make noise that there is.
Oh yes. And let's talk about what we've got it going on. The Castellan Crimson Guard. So these are Solar Auxilia who are born and raised from Castellan who venture forth with the First Legion. Many of the soldiers who served with Hyzo were too old to begin the procedures needed to become an Astartes, and there were just too many of them for them all to be transformed into false Astartes. So Castellan would need to be brought up to the Imperium's level of military technology, as the armies there, until the arrival of the Crusade, had just fought with sword and spear and primitive gunpowder weapons. Hyzo attempted to resolve this by bringing in some imperial officers to work with the remaining commanders of the free armies, and after roughly half a decade, they had educated and trained enough of the free armies that a regiment of Solar Auxilia could be created from Castellan, known as the Castellan Crimson Guard, who fought just as any other guardsman regiment would, but there was an emphasis placed on their effectiveness in CQC, because obviously a lot of them were trained with the blade, which they still hold on to quite furiously. They won't give it up.
While you were coddling your gun, I studied the blade.
They laughed as I sharpened my katana. I laughed as I butchered their bodies.
They laughed as they built their communist economy.
Look, you've been warned. But they'll fight using a mixture of flak and carapace armor in their uniforms. And instead of now being known as the Free Armies, they march under the name of the Castellan Crimson Guard. And many of the Castellan Crimson Guard are still based on Castellan. They are the first line of defense for the Primarch's homeworld. The Legion would be called back if things got worse, but they are basically kind of like the Prosper and Spire Guard, in a sense. A similar kind of thing. Like they'll venture with the Legion, but at the same time, they're also like held responsible for the protection of the Castellan system and the world itself.
Yeah.
What else do we have to talk about relations with other Primarchs and legions.
Oh, goody.
Baby.
Are we friends?
Let's talk then. I think Heizo got on very well with each and every one of his siblings.
Near all of them. Some of
Yeah.
them not so much, but that's just because their personality wasn't really conducive for it.
Yeah, Heizo looked very much into seeing the good in people, and so each Primarch that came back was treated as another kind of like, you know, beloved brother or sister returning home. He obviously had like some soft spots for some of his siblings, and he had siblings that he valued over the others, but otherwise he just kind of he got on very well with everybody. Um,
Let's start with Golgarth then.
Golgarth. I mean, after Golgarth returned, he was not what Heizo was expecting, but nonetheless, Heizo was very much attempting to make him like comfortable to his new environment, trying to make him
Hey,
very much
buddy. How you
comfortable in
doing?
it.
How you holding up? How's the scales?
Yeah, I hear that you know that the psychically caused you know mind fuckery that usually goes away after a couple of millennia. You know, just just disappears after a bit.
No, it doesn't.
Dude, I promise. Legion insanity, only temporary.
Yeah.
What did Heizo feel about the Second Legion losing its tactical superiority over the years?
It was something that kind of pained him to watch because he'd come to rely on the Second Legion being these very capable commanders. So when the First Legion was involved with the Second Legion, I believe during the Vendralak campaign, which was a campaign which was actually caused by the First Legion because diplomacy failed between the Imperium and the Vendralak Dominion. The Second, and the Seventh Legions joined him, and halfway through that campaign, the Legion started suffering from this massive genetic flaw, which Heizo kind of feels a little bit responsible for because, like, he brought them into that campaign, but at the same
I mean, I
time,
don't know what happened. Everything was fine, and then they just started screaming.
Dad, I broke the Second Legion. They stopped doing the thing. They're broken. I need a new Legion. These ones are broken.
I don't know what happened, Dad. They just started screaming. They took off their helmets and they were roaring and biting people's heads off. It was weird.
Can you just imagine like Heizo trying to bury an entire Legion in a sand pit? Where's the Second Legion, Heizo? I don't know, Dad. They were around here somewhere. I saw them. I don't know where they've gone though. There's like this great big mound in the sand pit with like hands and shit sticking out.
Don't look at that. That's not anything. It's it's plants. Dead plants.
They're just orcs. Don't worry about it.
All right.
But yeah,
Sylphia.
he just he felt a little bit. He felt bad, and I think he sympathized very greatly with Gulgarth's kind of the realization that he may be partially responsible for his son's fall from grace, but he still did everything that he could to make sure that Gulgarth was protected and comfortable. And I think he also kind of like spoke with Hanan and got the First Legion to donate a lot of their gene seed to serve as officers for the Legion because they just weren't capable of producing officers for themselves that could handle themselves under pressure. But yeah, let's talk Zilthia.
Zilthea.
Zilthia says that the Heizo was one of the individuals that she could truly trust, which I laugh at now because she couldn't trust him.
Oh yeah, no, she could not.
I think they at least behaved quite civilly. Zilthia, I don't think ever showed Heizo a very great deal of warmth, but Heizo took as good as he got, and he just kind of ran with it. The same goes for Solgrim, really. Solgrim was quite distant from Heizo, but when the two met, they always kind of acted quite civilly and they got on quite well. There wasn't a lot of kind of like, two guys chilling out over like a beer or a glass of wine or something, but they did get on.
Well, yeah. Next is Raziel?
Raziel, I think Heizo tried with Raziel, but it wasn't until kind of like after
Everyone
the Hive.
tried with Raziel.
We've exhausted all of the measures. The dude just needs to be put down. Yeah, Heizo tried, but Raziel quite. I suppose he just nulled all of the advances that Heizo tried to make, like all of the outreach hands that he was offering him, and that like Raziel just was very antisocial by nature. So Heizo did like try and help, but it wasn't until after the Hive Wars that Raziel actually tried like vying for Heizo's friendship, but it was for an alternate purpose, not just genuine friendship.
I want to be your friend. I definitely don't have a gun.
Odinar.
Odinar.
Heizo was quite It took a bit of time for Heizo to warm up to Odinar after what happened to Olympus. It took a bit of time. But he came to value Odinar as obviously a naval tactician and just how capable he was in void warfare. And eventually, Odinar became quite a trusted friend of Heizo, but Heizo was always still a little bit weary of him just because of what he'd done previously.
Look, buddy, I like you, but ripping his asshole out through his nose, probably not the best idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and Heizo was still Heizo's quite respectful of obviously the culture that Odin's got going on the Yggdrasil, like all of his berserkers and stuff, and his naval warfare, but at the same time, like just how brutal the Wild Hunt were is like, dude, there's no need, just let them commit seppuku. Wait, what? No, not the head. No, Jesus Christ. Jaraxxus.
Yeah, the flame guy.
Buddy, you're my brother and everything, but could you please stop setting all the planets on trying to take on fire, please? I think is the general consensus on that. He gets on with Jaraxxus. He gets on with all of his brothers and sisters, but just never could quite understand why the dude wanted to set everything on fire.
Brother,
obviously,
I get that your tactics are effective.
The world on fire.
Obviously, quite keen to cash in on that when everything goes bad, but during the Great Crusade, just never could quite see why the dude kept trying to set stuff on fire.
Buddy, you get that the point is to bring the planet in with people on it, right?
People, don't make me laugh.
Vizar.
They spent a few times where they would just sit and talk for hours about about just the way the Imperium was. There was one quite notable encounter that Vizar and Heizo had where they would where Vizar came and visited Kostalan, and they were talking about how justified it was for the Imperium to continue as it was. Heizo was believed in it, and Vizar was pointing out to Heizo kind of like the inconsistencies and the what's the word? What's the word for not inconsistencies when you're calling out somebody for doing something that they're
hypocrisy?
Yeah, that's the one. Just the hypocrisy of the Imperium in some of the aspects of like the way that they are trying to make the Imperium better for people, but at the same time they're turning people into servitors, lobotomizing individuals and keeping like the crews of starships in just like unimaginable squalor. So he was the two of them spent like many days and hours debating if the Imperium was truly justified. And that all came to a head when they decided to fuck all that noise and build their own, which was even worse. but yeah, yeah. Belia.
Belia Dulvanus.
10 out of 10. Protect at all costs.
Definitely not the Primarch that your wife created.
Yeah. Belia just kind of like had quite a mean streak in her, and she would run circles around other individuals in terms of just like sneaking up on them or just being very quick-witted with them. And Heizo enjoyed watching his little sister just kind of like trip people up in conversations and so on and so forth. And he would also be the first one to audibly come to her aid when many people were criticizing how secretive the Ninth Legion are. Heizo had complete trust in his sister, and it absolutely tore him to pieces when she was killed at the end of the Hive Wars.
Hadrian Leth.
I think as well as can be expected to someone who just drains the strength out of you whenever you're near them. Just did his best, really.
Wary, staying wary of them.
Yeah. Kind of treated him with a modicum of respect, or treated him with a great deal of respect because of what he could do. But at the same time, I think the two of them understood quite well that it caused Heizo. Heizo was uncomfortable around Hadrian. But Heizo never underestimated how powerful his brother was. Always understood that his brother was quite capable and had an immense amount of power.
I mean, when someone has the ability to look at your soul and make it cringe.
Yeah. Yeah. Tigurius Ferox. The Tiger Boy.
So-called executioner.
Heizo didn't believe in the Emperor's Fang's purpose of executioners. He didn't believe that such a role was warranted. But I think as the 11th Legion like surveyed all the other legions to get a grasp of their fighting styles and such, he was quite happy to show off how capable and how powerful his warriors were in their sword form, which came back to bite him on the ass when the 11th fought the 1st. But as a whole, he was quite pleased to see that the 11th and by extension Tigurius were taking into account all the different fighting styles of the cultures that they were supposed to be potentially taking care of, which showed that Tigurius wasn't an idiot and he was treating all of the legions with the respect and also the caution that they deserved. Each of them was extremely powerful in their own right.
And Conan?
I think Heizo got on pretty well with Inconan. The both of them very much shared Heizo at the very least shared an interest with Inconan in architecture. And there were several worlds that Inconan would kind of like build, just little things that Heizo would pick up on, like certain plazas being built using Castilian architecture and so on and so forth. Just these little things that would happen. That Inconan would do that Heizo would just like. The two of them were quite like I think Heizo shared a lot of things with Inconan. Inconan was obviously the master of architecture and of diplomacy, but it was something that the two of them had in common. That Heizo was he was enthusiastic in architecture and diplomacy, but not as good as Inconan. But the two still would discuss it.
For the last 30 seconds, the only thing I've heard was Careless Whisper.
Really? You need to shut your mouth, okay?
Come on, don't tell me you didn't think it either.
Inconan, tell me once again of how you built the building in this way. Tell me about the structural supports and the deep foundations over a glass of wine.
Well, by using each individual piece of this white brick structure, I've erected
baby!
This great
tower. Baby!
All right, Kynan.
I need a minute. Hang on. Oh shit. Oh god.
Hear about your long, hard trials.
Johnny not helping.
Johnny, no. Moving on from big buildings to big boys.
The biggest boy.
Kynan.
Heizo and Kynan gone on pretty well. Obviously he had he was very conflicted in terms of when it came up to Kynan's execution. There's just kind of like he felt conflicted because obviously Kynan had fucked up and allowed his legion to just kind of like engage in an open rebellion.
I love you, but you're such a fucking failure.
Yeah, why'd you have to be such an idiot, dude? But at the same time, like he didn't believe that Kynan should be allowed to shouldn't have been executed for it, which of course he wasn't. But still, like it's just kind of
we didn't know that at the time.
We didn't know it at the time. No,
it's one of those secret things that the Emperor likes to do.
He was also a bit distrustful of the fact that like Kynan was bagging an alpha level psyker.
I mean,
yeah.
If you can, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it was
because it can too easily end with your soul being trapped in a crystal or something.
Yeah, I think I much prefer sitting in a dimly lit.
Risks.
I much prefer sitting in a dimly lit room with Encode and sipping wine and talking about buildings. Thank you very much.
You make mistakes in the heat of passion, Jimbo.
Shit. Oh god.
Ice.
Just can't do it.
Or Ace, however it's pronounced.
Ace.
Strong arches. Deeping walls.
I'm just saying.
Hang on a second.
The bridge looks great.
Aren't I supposed to be the one recovering from coronavirus? Why is this dude spluttering like a dickhead over there?
I'm crying.
Heizo loved A's as much as a brother could love his retarded like little brother. Like,
brother, I've replaced my lungs with toasters.
This is what I'm talking about, Johnny. Like, Heizo had like a love and a respect for his brother, but at the same time just didn't understand why the fuck this dude just kept replacing his limbs with machinery.
Heizo just kind of it was one of the two Primarchs that was actually there to see Ace go from sort of human with a vast amount of augmentation to almost complete machinery.
Yeah, Heizo and Celestia were the only two who kind of like I suppose saw him with hair.
He remembers when Ace had eyeballs.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot what color your eyes were now.
They were black like soul.
Let's go back to talking about bridges. Bridges. Right. And obviously he was looking at Ace with concern as his mental state deteriorated, but at the same time, your mental state would probably deteriorate if like someone nuked your planet and destroyed like the 15 billion tetraflops of porn that you had hidden there as well.
Tetraflops? Oh god. That's a lot of data.
I missed something.
Think of all the cat videos that you'd lose if with like 15 billion tetraflops of cat videos.
15 billion tetraflops?
It's all been partitioned up.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's all organized.
Yeah.
See, these are the cat videos for
As
when I'm
as
depressed.
the Maurice is burning, you've got like A's trying to like run a shit like a madman, trying to transfer everything from the C drive to the D drive. Trying to transfer everything to like a portable USB.
The D drive. I'm sure.
Yeah, he's trying to shift everything to a portable USB. It's like the size of a battle barge. It's just a USB with thrusters on it.
Also
Father, I've
included are
come to
videos
download
of it.
Terra.
Also included are videos of Conan building towers.
Could you imagine though, like if one of A's ships was basically this giant USB? Can you imagine how awkward it would be if you're flying it into the planet to upload data and you have to like you stop the first time,
Stop.
but you have to flip
no,
it over.
Phantom, stop. Stop.
You're flying
Leon!
you're flying this thing into the planet and you have to stop and flip it over to like a full 180, and then you have to stop and flip it over another 180, and it goes in again. Like just it's like you're like rotating a battle barge 360 degrees. Like, I don't understand why it didn't just do that the first time. What is it?
I don't know, man. It's the machine spirit.
Fucking machine spirit. This USB is a dick.
All right, Leon.
A lot of respect for someone who has like no inherent kind of like extra abilities. Someone probably one of the most ordinary out of the Primarchs, but like a lot of respect for someone who can just, despite the fact he doesn't have like any fancy sword skills, psychic powers, keen technological senses, who just picks up a sword and a shield and just charges into battle. A lot of respect for someone who has the stones to go and do that, despite the fact that Leon is still like, you know, a demigod.
Yeah, like compared to every other Primarch, Leon's just a guy.
Yeah. So a lot of respect to like this 10-foot tall guy who just picks up a sword and shield and charges into battle.
I'm just a kid,
Vorstus
and life is a nightmare.
kind of disapproves of Vorstus's kind of just shunning of honor. Just does he does believe that like just destroying a planet's atmosphere or biosphere is not
Bro,
a
this
very
totally
honorable
doesn't
thing.
vibe with my communist mentality.
Where Jaraxxus destroys an atmosphere, Vorstus destroys the biosphere.
But between the two of them, they could just completely like death world a planet.
I mean, when you destroy an atmosphere, that's death world enough.
Yeah, you just want everything gone at all. But yeah, I mean the two of them understood each other, like, but Vorstus shunned Hyzo for his belief in honor, and Hyzo shunned Vorstus for his disbelief in honor. So the two of them were at least on civil terms, but they just didn't see the point in what the other was doing.
They just weren't compatible.
No, they both still loved building time within Conan though.
Of course, Celestia.
A capable leader, but very impulsive.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, he understood obviously that she was capable as a commander, but disapproved with how impulsive some of her decisions were. He disapproved of the fact that their psycho indoctrination was altered slightly, which made them obviously more impulsive and vulnerable to increased kind of like surges of emotion. Hyzo believed that when Astartes are in combat, there shouldn't be any emotion. They should just be calm, completely disciplined. And the fact that the Celestial Legion weren't, that they acted just purely on like emotion and shit.
Sister, you're throwing off my groove.
He didn't like it.
Mm-hmm. And then Zolan?
Shit. think I can see my lungs.
Ugh.
Nice. Had a lot of respect for an individual who could take a legion of murderers and turn them into disciplined warriors. Very much greatly. Also, as Zolan was a fan of building things.
Here we go again.
Yeah, he'd spent a lot of time with Zolin as worlds were being turned into defensive worlds and fortress worlds. Was also quite happy to just kind of like sit and talk with Zolan, as Zolan was quite inexperienced when it came to like the general things of like just managing an army and the Imperium and such. So Hyzo was quite a big brother to Zolan. Let's talk
and then
Varkas.
Fast Boy Varkas.
Varkas and Hyzo were very, very similar. Hyzo was very happy to introduce Varkas to a lot of the things that Kostalan had to offer, like the culture, the architecture, just the general kind of like their way of life. And Varkas was very happy to just go around and look at it all. At the same time, Hyzo was quite impressed by how fluid and how kind of like graceful the movement of Varkas's forces were. Like he made the battle kind of look like an art form, which Hyzo did as well to some extent, but not as quick moving and fluid as the Outriders were. And as for the Star Sentinels,
Tyrad got nommed, so it doesn't matter.
Sending positive vibes, sending thoughts and prayers.
So can we quickly kind of gloss over the major conflicts of the Legion before the Heresy?
Yes. So we have the Vendralak campaign, which is 814 to 814. It goes on for about 10 years, I'd say. There's also at least 2 of the Ranglin Xenocides. He's also involved in the Dverga Wars, the War of the Astus Descent, which is the first battle that the 14th Legion take place in. As well as that, there is also the Hive Wars, which played like kind of like the largest role in. So those are the major conflicts that the first have been in as of this moment.
And the Hive Wars specifically is the event that planted the first seeds of doubt in Hyzo.
Yes. So when it is during one of the final battles of the Hive Wars, the Unification, the Emperor's flagship, accidentally nukes and kills Belia Delvinus, the Primarch of the Ninth Legion, and for an individual who
supposedly accidentally.
Supposedly accidentally, it was engineered by the Fifth Legion, but never actually confirmed. Hyzo just kind of like breaks down because that was the first loss of a sibling that he had ever experienced outside of Keenan, but like the bond that Belia and Hyzo shared was just completely dwarfed the bond that Hyzo had with Keenan. So it just completely broke him, and the revelation that Raziel eventually gave him when he returned from the warp, that Belia's death may have actually been planned or engineered. The Emperor knew that she was down there, but he just didn't care. She was just disposable. And as time went on, obviously Themorius was nuked, Barbarous was nuked. Hyzo began to notice this a lot more within the Emperor. He viewed he was kind of like coming to the conclusion to himself. Yeah, I know, it's very depressing. That the Emperor may be slightly less caring towards his children than he thought. And eventually that kind of like brings him to the conclusion that the Emperor needs to be replaced, and Hyzo would be the individual to do it. Hyzo gathered as many of his siblings to his side as he could, personally bringing in Conan over, Also going to Thermorius to confront Aes, and being like horrified to discover that Aes's mental state is just kind of like deteriorating. But eventually brought the many of his siblings to his side, like outright before the heresy even began.
Ace, no, Ace, please.
Yeah, Heizo was very well liked, like Horus, but difference being is that Heizo had strong connections with more stable individuals.
He wasn't best friends with the psychopaths.
He had a feeling that there would be some who would stand with the emperor no matter what. So he was very careful. There was a lot of political maneuvering in which he would kind of like hint that he was doing things, and it was up to those who kind of like shared a similar feeling with him of whether or not they decided to take him up on the offer, which is what happened to Vazar. With Aes, he was just kind of upfront with it. Was like, hey, we're going to take down Dad. You in or out? And Aes was just kind of like, well, shit, my dog. That's all you had to say.
Look, we're gonna try and peacefully negotiate a civil secession from the Empire. Yeah, but see, he blew up my house.
So I'm in. And he brought a lot to his side. Like he was pretty much bankrolling the Legio Brutus, so they were in straight away. The Kensaishi were and the Costellan Crimson Guard, they were on board almost immediately. Many of, I think almost all of the great clans were pretty much in his pocket already. There was just one great clan that he didn't have the full support of.
Save the Nakama.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
We're coming them later. We're doing it later.
So he had most of the great clans like covered already. Within the Sakia great clan, the Ten Brothers were looking at what the Emperor was doing. Obviously announcing that the Council of Primarchs would be disbanded and mankind would rule the Imperium. Many of them looked into it, and the outcome that they saw was that they were going to be replaced and decommissioned. There was some amongst them that kind of like still believed in the Emperor's plan. It's heavily implied that these individuals were silenced, and it is neither confirmed nor denied whether or not the real Hidan Sakia died with those individuals.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, is that no one knows who Hidan is, where he is, if he's alive or not.
Yeah, he could very much be dead. He could be the individual who is still alive.
I am Spartacus.
Right. So just before the heresy actually fully kicked off, Heizo called a meeting of all of his great clan masters. So they all appeared and headed into the Dark Horizon to have a meeting. And it was at this point when Heizo publicly announced that, yeah, we're gonna go succeed from Daddy. And although he had like the agreement of obviously Hidan, Yabura, Hagane, and even Nazai, Nazai was loyal to the Great Crusade, and he saw what the Emperor was doing, and he fully believed that Heizo was doing the right thing, which absolutely horrified and disgusted Saikanus Nakama, who had sworn allegiance to the Emperor. So Saikanus Nakama escaped from the Great Clan meeting, took his Great Clan, and escaped from the combined fleets, where they began waging their own like kind of secret war against the First Legion during the heresy.
Sort of kind of guerrilla war, but not really.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of support. They didn't have the full backing of the First Legion. They were also very much aware that if they did encounter any like actual loyalist forces, that they would very much just be accused of being traitors and just exterminated on sight anyway. So they were basically just fighting completely without support whatsoever until they were all killed.
Mm-hmm.
And
then leading up to before the Siege of Terrace, or kind of leading up to that, were there any kind of important things that went down with the First Legion versus others, or within itself?
So from what I have at the moment, Yabura was kind of like just destroying important kind of like loyalist strongholds for the First Legion. Hagane had kind of like very publicly come out now as just being a lunatic and
Oh
a
no, hold
very
up out here.
fanatical religious believer in Heizo. Like obviously the fact that he was one of the Emperor's children, he was practically a demigod, and now the fact that he was like moving for succession. Um, Hagane was just kind of like, he is God. Jeebus is here, and like the Shinra Great Clan were basically just kind of like spreading news of the gods of a new god coming. They were just completely mental. Nazai and his legion were just kind of like helping the rest of the legion fight their way towards Terra. And
Knock knock. Would you like to hear about our Lord and Savior Satan?
Hidan and their great clan, they were capturing strategic targets for the First Legion and for the traitors, um, during which they actually kind of came into direct conflict with the remains of the Third Legion. They just kind of like had were fighting kind of like a ghost war with them. The Third Legion were very quick, but the First Legion were able to kind of like make these tactical predictions of where they would be, but the two were never able to kind of like overcome the other. They were just landlocked for a bit. And then at one of the climaxes of the battle of the heresy, let me find successor discussions because I want to get this right. During the Siege of Thranx, the Black Ronin bypassed the Orokai Great Clan's First Fleet and the Blazing Skull's 7th and 11th Fleet while they were locked in combat with Loyalist Imperial warships as well as supporting elements of Knight Gallant's vessels. Sycanis led the Ronin on a near suicidal pod assault, the Nakama Great Clan, on a near suicidal drop pod assault on the traitor Honorbound's positions, and they basically just went like into trench fighting with katanas. Sycanis and his command squad, they fought their way into the bunker of Nazai, and basically the Nakama Great Clan just butchered the Orokai Great Clan just for being traitors. And soon after they were able to just like retreat, but it was probably one of the most daring surgical strikes of the heresy, as it was basically taking place under the cover of an existing battle. The loyalists had kind of like some idea there was something going on, and the traitors to some extent they were kind of trying to hide it, but the full extent of what happened in that battle is only known to the Nakama Great Clan and the survivors of the First Legion. So during the Siege of Terra,
the actual Solar War,
and the actual Siege of Terra, Legio Brutus got dropped on Terra, and they were out there basically just setting fire to the planet, trying to bait the loyalists out of the Imperial Palace.
Whether or not that worked, we have yet to figure out.
No.
And the Lord said unto thee, "Parry this, filthy casual."
The only other thing that I can really say, the Honorbound were just kind of like they were engaged all over the place. Hidan and his legion were still fighting the third. Yabura was and his great clan, they were busting through the walls. They were seeing probably the most frontline use. Hagane and his great clan, they were just like, I think they were just doing blood rituals. They were trying to help break through the palace's defenses just using like, sacrifices and shit like that. But obviously it all came to a head when Heizo marched into the Imperial Palace, marched straight past Leon, leaving him to fight a butcher's nails possessed Zilthea. And between Raziel, Varkas, and Heizo, they struck down the Emperor. At which point Heizo was immediately backstabbed and betrayed by Raziel, who began his ascension to a demon prince of
Demonwood.
Malal. Eventually this was stopped, but I won't give away just who by just yet. But Varkas was able to retrieve the body of Hyzo and retreat. The loyalists, the Nova Bears, the Celestial Legion, and elements of the Star Sentinels arrived to help drive off the traitor forces. The Ybura and his great clan, they held the line for as long as possible to try and just block the loyalists from completely overwhelming them. And at that point, it was just kind of a war of attrition, trying to keep the loyalists from fighting the traitors all the way back into the Eye of Terror, which they succeeded in eventually. But the traitors were
only
still kind
after
of like,
erecting a warp storm.
yeah, they were trapped basically around the edge of it, and they had no choice but to try and grow and thrive like that. So Hidan may or may have not been dead. Ybura was as far as we're aware, Ybura was the only tactically sound not Primarch, clan master who was still holding the First Legion together. Hagane had gone mad. He'd locked himself in within a fortress that he'd hastily erected just to try and like come to terms with how wrong he was. And at that point, the Shinro Great Clan just started tearing itself apart because they had no leadership and they were all just going nuts, being possessed. And Hagane was contacted eventually in his isolation by a warp entity who became known as the Lord of Blades. And Hagane foolishly believes, that this being is a shard of Hyzo's soul, and so has pledged service to this being and is now carrying out his own dark, twisted deeds, creating even more powerful and dangerous Chaos Space Marines and possessed Space Marines.
While you guys were busy worshipping the regular gods, I studied the way of the blade.
That's that entire Great Clan in a nutshell. You did this thing. Well, I was studying the blade.
Basically, yeah, they're just nutters. Ybura and Hidan, they did their best to hold the Legion together while obviously the Orokai was wiped out, and Shinro are just kind of like, we're worshipping this blade. We're not going to tell you why though.
This sword is important. Why?
So
don't worry about it.
So the First Legion kind of like managed to hold themselves together, and eventually the first Black Crusade was launched after a while of kind of like just the Dark Imperium being formed. The First Legion ventured out of Segmentum Obscurus, or outside of the Dark Imperium's territories, only to be, drumroll please, assaulted by the remaining forces of the Nakama Great Clan, who had now rebranded themselves the Black Ronin. Led by Sykanis Nakama.
God,
they were basically there were only like 10,000 of them left, and they had basically declared a penitence crusade against the entire forces of the First Legion. They would not rest until the First Legion were destroyed.
And now we have the moment that Phantom has been waiting for.
I get to jack off over Sykanis Nakama. It's great. So oh boy. Oh boy. So Sykanis Nakama basically faced Ybura in one-on-one combat during the first Black Crusade, and he was like, your Legion will never be safe. Our father will never be safe. Everything that you create, we will destroy, or we will die trying. And Ybura was just so taken aback by how unrelenting and how unbreakable this dude's will is. When the first Black Crusade came to an end, Ybura just went into the mausoleum where Hyzo's body was being stored, and he never came out. There is a suit of armor wandering around inside that mausoleum, and it looks an awful lot like Ybura's, but anyone who gets close to Hyzo's grave or his tomb is just torn apart by this walking monstrous suit of armor, and that kind of leaves Hidan as the sole leader of the First Legion. He represents the First Legion on the Shadow Council, and he leads the First Legion in their day-to-day activities during the Dark Imperium. The Ten Brothers is no more. They are now their own established order, as Hidan now has the freedom to create as many copies of him as he wants. It's actually unknown how many copies there are now of Hidan, or if Hidan is truly alive.
He is one of two non-Primarch, one of the two only non-Primarch council.
Yes. And also, I think Sykanis Nakama and the Black Ronin became such a problem for the First Legion, despite the fact that they had no support, no backup whatsoever. They basically just resupplied from what they took from the other legions. They became such a problem for the First Legion that Varkas Alamraka and the Outriders were called in to actually take care of the Black Ronin. Sykanis Nakama was able to inflict what would usually be a mortal wound upon the Primarch. It had no effect, and just Varkas tore him in half. But he kept the katana that Sykanis impaled him with, and it's actually one of the most treasured artifacts in his collection now. But even so, the Black Ronin have pledged that they will never take on another soul until their entire number are just wiped out. So they're on a penitence crusade until they die, until they all die, and they are all so terrified of Sykanis Nakama, like they actually genuinely believe that if they recruit another Astartes, this dude will just rise from the grave and just beat the fuck out of them. So yeah. You sound so unimpressed. It's almost like I haven't repeated this to you so many times.
Yeah, it's almost like it's your favorite character.
It's almost like it's the thing that I've spent the most time developing. Okay. So
and no wonder Sykanis died. He stabbed when he should have slashed. You don't stab with a katana.
Yeah, it was a rookie mistake. It was his first day, okay?
What a fucking scrub.
It was his first day in Primarch killing. Right, so we're 5 minutes we're 5 minutes over an hour and a half. Do we want to just ask questions really quickly, or
yeah, we have some time for questions.
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Let's do some questions then, boy.
Questions. Ask away.
No, you're meant to ask the questions, Johnny, not me.
Oh, I see.
Well, the audience is supposed to ask the questions.
Jesus Christ! Jesus Christ! Oh yeah, what questions would you like to ask me? He's like, no, Johnny, I'm not asking you the questions. You're asking me the questions. You dumbass.
And whoever's in the chat is also asking questions.
I think we only have one person in the chat, and it's me.
You know, you never know, okay?
We have no questions. We have no questions whatsoever. There is nothing.
Well, that's unfortunate.
It is.
Well, I can't think of any. You went into really good detail over the entire thing. Despite all of my shit posting, I was actually paying attention.
Zeph caught me very off guard with a few of the questions about obviously Costellan. The actual reason that I haven't gone into a lot of detail on the laws is I just didn't think that they were generally that important.
That's why I ask questions.
You're very good at that.
Because I always ask the questions that no one considers.
Yeah, you're very good at that. Do we have anything else?
I actually do have one question. How did the situation between Vizar and Zilthea kind of like shape his attitude towards?
Oh yeah, because he intervened, didn't he? He intervened.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question, please?
So yeah, I just kind of want to know how the situation between Vizar and Zilthea kind of affected his decision-making process on who he wanted to recruit, as well as like how it kind of changed his perspective on both of the Primarchs.
I think, to be truthful, Heizo kind of every time he was looking at Zilthea and I don't think anybody had actually told Zilthea that was how Visar had operated. So up until that point in time, Heizo was just kind of happy to turn a blind eye because he believed Vizar was a necessary evil. But it wasn't until Zilthea looked at how kind of like the stuff that he was doing and quite vocally pointed out and was just like, hey, well, no, he's doing this stuff. This is bad. That Heizo kind of looked at it and he was like, okay, no, you've got a point. We need to kind of tone down how savage we're being because it's just being savage for the point of being savage. I'll be right back. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Okay, I had another question, but I guess we'll occupy our time elsewise. Hey, Johnny, do you have a funny joke?
So 2 scientists walk into a bar. One scientist says, I'll have some H2O. The second scientist says, I'll have some H2O too. The second scientist died.
Ha ha ha!
Did you hear about
I
that
guess.
celebrity who got stabbed? Reese.
Reese who?
Reese something. Reese. It was a woman. Reese.
Witherspoon?
No, with her knife.
Oh my god! I just come into the tail end of that, but I knew it was what that was you were doing. You're terrible. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, has anybody got any more questions, or are we just gonna call it here?
I do actually have another one. We kind of glossed over the fact that Heizo kind of walked past Leon at the Eternity Gate, and we also skipped over the fact that they were dueling earlier at the Solar Line before
Yes.
Ace interrupted by blowing up Leon's shield.
Yeah.
Heizo was basically denied a proper duel with Leon 2 times. One time from intervention, and another because he's restricted on time. What was his kind of opinion about, like, did he want to face Leon, or did he just want to get things done?
To be truthful, he didn't particularly want to face any of his siblings in combat. The duel between Leon and Heizo, it was kind of like he didn't want to have to fight Leon, but Leon wasn't giving him that much more of a choice. Leon was set on defending Terra and defending the Emperor. The only individual that Heizo actually kind of like could force himself to fight was the Emperor. Unfortunately, Leon was just kind of in the way, and being in the way, that meant that Heizo would just have to remove him. Whether he could do that diplomatically, which I'm sure at some point he tried. Unfortunately, it did just kind of boil down into a melee. The first time he was genuinely just like trying to talk Leon down, like, come on, dude, you don't need to do this, and Leon was like, no. But the second
you shat in the bed, I gotta clean it up.
But the second time he had kind of like had a feeling that he would not be able to turn Leon around, so when they went to the palace, he brought Zilthea with him. And like when Heizo kind of stood very triumphantly at the gate with his honor guard and was like, "You ain't getting in, bro," Heizo was just kind of like, "Yeah, just drop the angel on him," and then just walked past him.
Was Heizo disappointed that he wasn't able to take care of Leon in an actual sort of honorable dueling fashion, or does he just not care?
As like more of the chaotic energies flowed into him, he began to care less about honor, which is why civilians and the like were just kind of like butchered. As the heresy moved forward, he began to care less and less about the individuals that he was supposedly fighting for, and to some within the First Legion, and to some definitely within the who are fighting alongside him, that kind of it's that word again. What was the word?
Hypocrisy.
Thank you, Zeph. It was the hypocrisy that was just kind of like for a being who believes a being who believes so much in honor, is now just fights completely without it. This is what chaos does to an individual. And so when I suppose it served as an example for why the Dark Imperium needed to work as much as it did.
Compass. This is your moral compass on chaos.
Basically, it's probably why the Dark Imperium doesn't embrace the ruinous powers as much as Hyzo did, because it just destroyed him well before he got to Terra.
Any one of the Primarchs who genuinely went all in didn't come out the same.
No, definitely not. It turned
Ace. It turned Ace into a fucking rock.
Turned Ace into a planet. Turned Belia into just someone who just completely gets off on running like people in circles. Turned Vizar into someone who just is completely dependent upon their patron to stay alive, and
it made Odinar very angry.
It made Odin red. That's about it, really, to be truthful.
I have one last thing that we should probably go over. Earlier we mentioned that that Ace jumped the gun and started the whole warlike secession, but we hadn't really explained why that happened.
Yeah, Odin. No, not Odin. Ace's mental state was just deteriorating, wasn't it?
He was on the downstroke before the burning of Thamorius, and then just to have the Emperor twist the knife, pour salt in the wound, whatever the fuck you want to call it, and burn his homeworld and everybody on it, it set him over the edge. At that point, he didn't care if he was going to do it alone. Terra was going to burn.
Yeah. So when Hyzo kind of saw that happen, he was hoping to do it without bloodshed.
Ace, please.
Yeah. That was kind of the thing.
Please.
It was like Ace had just kind of forced Hyzo's hand because he was hoping to do it with the full support of all of his siblings, because then the Emperor wouldn't be able to say no. Like 20 legions versus the Custodes and the Solar Auxilia. And it ain't gonna happen. The heresy would have been over in like a year. But the fact that Ace had just kind of jumped the gun, Hyzo could still work with it because those legions that he knew were still loyalist. They at that point in time it was only versus Ace. So using his position as War Master, he could still kind of maneuver the legions who were a threat into positions that were more advantageous for the secession movement.
He could open the gate from the inside while Ace sat there knocking.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it was just kind of like a shame that Solgrim saw through that deception through actual insight, or just the fact that he had a premonition and was like, "This is fucking bad, guys. Come with me. We need to fix this."
Guys, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason that Hyza's plan failed was because Solgrim knew better.
Yeah. Solgrim just kind of he'd been having these premonitions for a while, and it was just the fact that it all just kind of married up on and I think, to be truthful, the heresy was foiled on a hunch, based on a hunch.
Hey guys, can I voice a suspicion with you? I know Ace is unstable in everything, but Ace is unstable in everything, so Ace leading a rebellion? Ace? Leading? Ace? Guys, do you really think this was Ace? Really?
Mr. Toaster?
Maybe someone leaked to the 14th Legion that the entire Argos catalog worth of toasters was just being stored on Terra. and Ace had just kind of started vibrating. He was like, "No, we need to take Terra. We need to destroy everything on Terra. We need the catalog."
They took my monthly subscription.
So I know that I said my last question was my last one, but this is my actual last question. When Hyzo is killed, is his soul going to be destroyed like how Horus's was, or is he merely going to die?
I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that completely up in the air. I'm going to leave it completely up in the air. I want to.
Interesting.
I want to just kind of obviously, like, Heizo's soul isn't just going to be completely reanimated again to just kind of like walk straight out of the Eye of Terror and be like, "Yo, guys, what's good?" Um, but I do kind of want him to be, obviously, as he was killed by an unknowing servant of Malal. His soul is lost very, very deep into the warp. It's so deep in there that he might not see the light of day again. Which obviously kind of like adds some truth to the Lord of Blades might very well be a fragment of Heizo's soul, but again, it might not. We don't know.
All right.
We just leave it
It's
kind
that's
of
all
like
I-
very very shrouded in mystery. We just it leaves it obviously up to readers' interpretation, but it also gives me the freedom to just kind of be like, well, is Heizo actually truly dead, or is he just not dead? Is he going to come back? It leaves it very open to interpretation. And if Heizo does come back, is he going to be the same?
Can we get
I
a
like it.
rundown of Heizo's top 10? Oh, god damn it.
Let's go back to talking about buildings.
Well, that's all the questions I had. We're now over by 20 minutes.
I think that's still not bad though, compared to like some of our TED talks.
Yeah, but I think we're good for today.
Okay. All right. So there is going to be a slight there may be a slight delay in when we might get our next podcast up, because obviously we've exhausted all of our main ready to go legions. We are going to start looking at other legions now, like some of those that are close to being completed, and we'll go into that. So a lot of our writers are going to be sent a mysterious message in the post that says something along the lines of, "You've been picked. You need to do some fucking work." Which obviously, as the world is going into lockdown due to coronavirus, it yeah, they should
We'll
have
have time.
plenty of free time. I mean,
The
obviously,
world is ending. You've
I'm
got
working
time to
for
write.
I'm working for a delivery company, so we're primary care. We'll keep working until we get told that we need to close. But for everybody else, yeah, plenty of stuff that they
Get a
could be doing.
stick out of your ass and start working.
Yeah. So
I don't
right,
know who
Yeah.
that's pointed towards. I'm so oblivious to
how about
who you might be talking
how about
about.
the dude with 3 legions that he's written kind of like half done each of them?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Johnny put the toasters away and build a full toaster.
All right.
We need to cook the bread.
Well, on that note, I think we're sort of wrapping up here. So
I think we are
remember,
wrapping
kids,
up.
stay hydrated and fuck toasters.